say anything you want right now.
Dear Theodosia, what to say to you?
Some Alexander Hamilton?
Oh, he knew it. Eric, thank you so much for being the first guest on my podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I wanted you to be on here for a couple of reasons. One, I've known you my entire life, so I know you're going to be very honest with me about all your answers. And the second is I had the opportunity to help you and your family about 10 years ago get into a house. So really wanted to start this with what led you to the decision to buy a house? What were those steps that you took with you and your family that said, okay, I'm ready. Let's pull the trigger.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm honored to be the first guest here because any chance I get to be with Brett Hansen is a win in my book. So what led us to getting a house really was centered around stability, right? I mean, we had grown up, I had been with my wife now, we'd been married for a while. We were living in basement apartments with family, which was great. We were super fortunate to have that. So I graduated from college, I'd had a stable job, and I had basically 2 years worth of income that I could show to get a loan at that point to where we could get into a house. And so it was a big decision because for me, even though I had a secure job and everything, that was a big financial change. We weren't paying rent to stay where we were, and now we have to go get a mortgage. I have a big payment coming every month. So that was kind of what led us to get a house, which was an exciting experience. It's crazy that it's been 10 years.
I know. It's been a minute. It still feels like yesterday. I remember coming down there and saying hi to your little corgi. It was fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So, I mean, big question. I know we were friends and everything, but you know a lot of real estate agents. You know a lot of people in general. Why me?
Yeah. Then to your point, I think as I think through that, I think there are probably 3 reasons that come to mind. So you mentioned the friendship. We've known each other for a really long time, which helps. What you also mentioned is it's not that I have a lot of friends. I just happen to have friends that are real estate agents that are also super close, former basketball teammates, served a service mission, and so one of my mission companions, people that I genuinely love, I care about, neighbors, all of this stuff. So friendship was there, but I don't know that that was the biggest determining factor for me with you, for better or worse. And so the second reason
I'll try not to take offense to that, but that's fine.
Yeah, we have a mutual friend, JD, who's always like, hey, I want to know where I am in your ranking of friends. Like, am I first? Am I second? He knows Donnie's there. He knows Brandon's there. So he's just like, where am I? So it's not a ranking system, at least for this decision. The second thing that really came to my mind was support. So this is probably 2 or 3 years before I was ready to buy a house. I was involved in a different startup where we were helping people and kids do fundraisers for their athletic events, for school clubs, for all of that stuff. And as part of that fundraising thing, there was an opportunity to have a real estate agent contribute to those fundraising opportunities for kids. And so you took a risk on me, which I really appreciate even to this day. That was a big risk for you to take. It was a new startup. Was it going to work? Was it going to blow up? Was it going to be useless? And then throughout that whole process, you gave me really helpful feedback as we were building that. So it wasn't just, okay, here's what happened. Here was my experience. This sucked. It was, here's what's happening. Here's what's my experience. This would be really good if you could implement this. We'd go back and do that. And then that worked out. So that support initially, I think that helped me with that decision. And then the third one was kind of going along with that is trust. So yes, our lifelong friendship helped. Yes, you supporting me helped. But I genuinely had a trust that you would do what was in my best interest, which I think for anything, whether that's real estate, an insurance agent, you're buying a car, whatever it is, to have that trust that that person isn't trying to swindle you or there isn't some backdoor mechanism where they're able to get more than maybe they deserve. I think that was a huge thing for us. So I knew you would do the right thing for us, no doubt about it. And that definitely paid off as we worked through that process because that wasn't an immediate thing. We took our time and you were very patient with us.
No, you guys were wonderful to work with. And I've worked with a lot of people. I can say that there's some that are just so much fun to work with, and especially seeing, you and your family and, looking at the kids going through the house and picking rooms and everything else. It's a blast. So I want to dive in a little bit more on a couple of things specifically that you said. One was, you're going to have to remind me what this school fundraiser was. What was this?
K-12 fundraising. And
Oh,
they would
my
do
goodness.
the surveys for.
Yeah. I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
I had no idea that had an impact,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy that I did that
Yeah.
now. I mean, I think that it dives into the type of person that you were looking for to work with somebody that's just going to help, no matter if it's going to help them or not. And I had no idea that K-12, now that you say it, of course I remember that.
Well, and I think you know me as a person to this point too, where I hate doing something and asking money of people if I don't feel like I'm giving value, right? Like I don't want to make
a fault. You do that.
Sure. Whether like you've been a part of Man Games, you've supported me in a lot of things. So it's really hard for me to say, hey, I want money when I don't feel like I've provided value. And I think you share that too. I think it's hard for you to be like, hey, sure, I'll come in and I'll make a commission, but I didn't do anything. And on your end, you've always done above and beyond, right?
Yeah. If that might just be personal insecurity.
Yeah.
I cannot sleep at night if I am sitting down and going, ooh, I didn't earn this, or this person probably thinks, what were they even there for? Like, that does not sit well with me at all. So, something else I want to talk about a little bit. You say insecurities. Tell me more about those feelings of trying to pick the right person, trying to make sure that you are making the right move for your family, and just what some of those emotions are brought up for you as a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, I think I alluded to it a little bit at the beginning with I finally got a job, I finally got settled, but crap, there's a mortgage now, and am I going to be able to afford that? At the same time, I think that part of me and those insecurities of me as a man, like, am I ever able to provide for my family? And there's a sense of like, yeah, can I provide the basics? But then on top of that, can I provide what they want?
Sure.
So from a wife, like, are we going to live in a shack where she's always upset and things are breaking all of the time? I'm not a handyman, so it's just like I would feel like I would fail in that situation. But sometimes budgets or life circumstances, that's all you can afford. And again, we were living in a basement with family where we weren't paying rent, which is a completely different situation than a lot of people experience. But as we go into that home, it's like, okay, I want to look for a home that makes me feel like I'm fulfilling that provider role and responsibility for my wife and for my kids. Again, are my kids going to be in a home that keeps them safe? And then there's also a little bit of a pride aspect to that.
Sure.
Is my house presentable for people that I would invite over? Yeah. And would the family feel comfortable inviting friends or other family members over?
I mean, that's the ego side of it. That's kind of the fun side of it, is you want your home to be something that you are so proud of, that you can invite people over and you're just excited for them to walk through the door and be like, look, this is all mine.
Yeah. Like, hey, look, Ma, I made it, right?
Look what I did.
Yeah, it's just like,
yeah.
And I, again, going a little bit deeper on the lack of skills, like, I am the least handyman man that I think anybody will meet. Like, if you wander around to some of the places in this house, and I think you may have seen that as you came in here, there's patches on the wall that haven't been fixed. There's like stuff like that where I feel like if I try to fix something, I'm going to ruin it worse and make more mistakes than fixing it. So finding a house that could accommodate that, like, no house is going to be perfect. There's always going to be something that happens. But going through that house and being like, okay, is there anything major that I'm going to need to fix? Because if so, like, we probably need to look somewhere else.
How long did it take you to learn to play the piano again?
That's different.
Okay.
I can play a song on the piano. That took 7 days. I don't
just
know
wanna
how to
check.
play the piano, though.
So Caitlin, when you're looking at this, he can figure things out. It's okay.
Desire is part of that too.
Yeah. I mean, so choosing an agent, that's a big part of buying a house. Thank you so much for choosing me. I want to give you my heartfelt, really thank you for that, because it means a lot to be trusted by friends and family. There's a very insecure part of being a real estate agent where, for your first year, not a whole lot of friends and family know you. I mean, I was basically a tween when I started this. And so, looking at this and saying, okay, would I choose me? Would I choose me to start? It's really a gut check. And so after a while, you get a few sales going, you get a few things going. But when you're brand new, everyone knows you're new. And it's such just a whirlwind of emotions trying to figure out, am I even qualified for this? That's a lot of money, and going into choosing that agent, there's a lot of different aspects, because choosing who you want to help you find your house is such a large piece of this. And I'm never going to be arrogant enough to say, oh, you have to choose me or you're not going to get the best. No, there's so many great real estate agents out there. I work with a ton of them.
You know what's so hard about that though is like as I'm trying to choose someone is I don't know. Like I knew you'd been in the industry for years at that point. I mean, whether that's TikTok at this point or YouTube or even a referral from a family member, like you don't know, are they really right for you?
Sure.
When you go into that, right? Because even we were talking before this, like your first house to your 10th house, you learn a lot. From your 10th house to your 50th house, you learn a lot. Once you start getting to a certain number, that kind of diminishes in the amount of growth that you're going to experience. Once you've sold your 500th house, there's probably not a big difference between 500 and 700. But the point is like before our decision to work with you or anybody's decision to work with anybody, you won't fully know that unless you've had experience with them. And so I had to rely on my experience with you as a friend and with someone who supported me and that trust factor before making that decision. So I think anybody looking for a real estate agent, as much as you can get referrals, people can buy Google reviews at this point. So I don't know how reliable those are. But
yeah,
knowing what you have going into that is a big fear for me. And as we were going through the different houses, that's where I was really able to see it from you. Like you took us everywhere. I mean, we went down south.
We did.
We
traveled around a little bit.
We went
miles.
Shopping. And it was over months. Like that was the thing is we're in Utah. I'm assuming most of the listeners here will be in Utah, but we went down to Provo. We went up north. I think we looked at a Bountiful house. We went into Heber. So through entire mountains, which is an hour away. And then we went out west where we actually ended up settling in South Jordan. But every house that we went to, and I knew this immediately is going to my lack of handyman thing is as we walked in there, you were like, okay, let's look at the roof. Let's look at the furnace. Let's look at the water heater. Let's look at electrical combinations. Let's look at the stuff that I wouldn't have looked at. Let's look at the ceiling around windows. Let's look at the door. Let's look at where it's facing. Let's look at all of this stuff where as a first-time home buyer, I'm just going and growing up in my parents' home and somebody else's home that's managed. You don't even look at that. I don't even think about that because if something breaks, my dad will take care of it or the landlord will take care of it. But in this case now, I have to be in charge of things.
Yeah, your dad.
Yeah. So you could say, oh, this furnace is old. You're probably going to need to replace this soon. This water heater looks good, but look, the drain isn't going or there's not a hose or something directing it to the drain. So if that floods, there's a problem. Yeah. So having that in there was really important, which leads me to a question that I want to ask you.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Sure.
What do you think is some of the more common mistakes that people make when choosing an agent?
I think not interviewing your agent and not asking them, getting a full picture that this person knows exactly what you're looking for. Real estate agents can have a good idea of what they think would be good for you. That might be completely different than what you think is good for you. And likely what you probably should have is somewhere in the middle. There's a bunch of different aspects that I would kind of like to touch on this subject. This might be a long answer.
Let's do this.
So mistakes in looking for a real estate agent, somebody that's not going to tell you the truth. Somebody that is not going to be honest with you because they're afraid to hurt your feelings. That is doing nobody any favors. Sometimes it can be really hard when somebody walks into a house, they love it. And you're going, oh my gosh, this is an absolute money pit. How do I tell them, like just shatter their hopes and dreams right now and set their expectations correctly? But if I don't do that, that's my responsibility. I know these things, they don't. I can walk into a house and pick up on a dozen signs that, hey, there's probably a lot of, just minor things that could have been done to save you a ton of money in the future. If I can see that in 5 minutes walking into a house, what happens when we really dig in here? What happens when we see that there's, the caulking around the tub hasn't been redone in 10 years? Ooh, there's probably mold back there. I wonder how far that goes. These things can get really expensive and some of them can be dangerous. And so, if you are not working with somebody who is willing to just tell you the honest truth, like, hey guys, you can have this house. I want you to budget for, X number of dollars for all these different things to go wrong. You can find yourself in trouble in a hurry. The other part of it is find somebody that you communicate really well with. There's been a few deals that go exactly the way that I think they're going to. but 99 times out of 100, there's going to be at least one speed bump.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be at least one thing that catches off guard. It's just, that's the nature of the game. And that's when you talk about the difference between 50 deals and 100 or 500, it's going through 200 inspections, going through all those different things. I know what to look for because it's been pointed out to me. It's and I've gotten quotes on it before, and I know when something's okay, that's fine. That little electrical repair is probably going to cost us $25 to pop in a new outlet, or hey, that's going to cost you $4,000. Like, there's a big difference there. And specifically for first-time home buyers, for people that are just cutting their budget close, a repair like that in the first 6 months could devastate them.
Mm-hmm.
And so
both of those, your first and second points are related, but I think very different. So the first one is being willing to be honest and communicate the truth to people,
mm-hmm.
but then also finding a communication style, right? Because people can be honest. Some people use that as an excuse to be rude, but people can be honest, but then that communication style isn't exactly lined up.
Yeah.
Again, going back to our experience as we're going through dozens of homes, I remember after every home we'd leave and you're like, all right, what did you like about this house and what didn't you like about this house? Which is probably common sense for most people once you're in this arena. But for us, that really helped us narrow down, but also helped you narrow down so we aren't wasting everybody's time going to houses that don't make sense. I didn't like that it was a one-car garage. Great. We're not looking for one-car garage houses anymore. Yeah. I did like that whatever, it was on one floor. Great. Let's narrow it down so that we're looking for ramblers rather than two-story homes. So those are related, but I think very different between being honest and open and finding a communication style that works.
Yeah, and the communication style is huge because you're going to get bad news at some point. Mm-hmm. You're going to get some tough news that's like, oh man, you know what, guys, this roof, it looked good when we were down on the ground. The other side of it's shot. This is going to be like 14 or 15 grand. I don't know if we're going to get it from the sellers,
mm-hmm.
you know? There's multiple offers and the people that are behind you are willing to pay the difference. How much do you like this house?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that type of thing. I have a saying that drives my buddy Jake crazy because I can get away with saying things that he apparently cannot, but you got to say it with a smile. Say it in a way that is going to relay the information. I'm not trying to, douse your hopes of getting this house, but I'm going to tell you the facts for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make sure that you have all the knowledge you need to go into this with your eyes wide open and you can make the right decision for you.
And I think you'll present alternatives. It's not just like, this is a no.
Yeah.
It's, this isn't going to work, but here's another option. And there's a story that we might get into later on that of what I came to you asking for. And you're like, Eric, I love you to death.
Please, let's get into that.
But here's an alternative.
I think that.
So what other big mistakes, as me looking for an agent, what would you recommend that I do? One was interview them, make sure that they're able to communicate well.
I would make sure that this is more for a specific buyer. It depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for a single family house, don't go to your commercial agent that sells commercial properties left and right. It's a whole different ballgame. If you love mid-century modern, find somebody who specializes in that. Like, even if that's not me, it'll break my heart. That's fine. Yeah. But having somebody who is an absolute expert, if you want something very specific, make sure you get that specific expert.
I think like high-end homes would probably be another category.
Yeah. High-end homes, make sure they have some experience doing what you're looking for, or at least have somebody to lean on. Yeah. Which I don't want to say that if you came to me right now and you said, I want to go buy a hotel. I've never helped somebody buy a hotel, but I could probably figure it out.
Yeah.
Would I bring somebody else in? 100%,
mm-hmm.
because that's the right thing to do to make sure that you get what you need. I'll find an expert, bring them in, and I'll learn at the same time you do. I have a base knowledge. I'm going to know a little bit more about you than you do because it's my everyday world, right?
Yeah.
But find somebody who is willing to admit when they're over their head.
Yeah.
That is a huge part of it, because you don't want somebody who hasn't answered every question.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want, and I hope that at this point, I've been through a lot of transactions. I hope that I can answer most of your questions, but in the event that I don't know the answer, if I make it up, that could cost you a lot of money and cost me our friendship, which would just make me so sad.
Never. Is there something that, as the person looking for somebody, is there a difference in where they've hung their shingle? So shameless plug, Windermere versus somebody else, right? Like another name brand.
Sure.
I don't want to promote any other names, but will that make a difference really for the average consumer of, okay, they're with one Windermere, or they're with Remax, or they're with Century 21 or whatever?
I mean, there's a lot of respectable brands out there. Part of what I do is run Windermere, so obviously I'm biased towards them.
Yeah.
I've traveled around a little bit. I've been different places, and I can't say that I wasn't successful over here and I am over here. I can say that the tools that I have at Windermere help me be a better agent. Being with a specific brand, a brand is very important. The agent is every bit as important as the brand, though. A successful agent is going to be successful wherever they're at. Mm-hmm. And so getting the nice part about having a big brand behind you is, for instance, we do a lot of off-market things where we have people that reach out to us, and sometimes there's a sticky situation where they don't want to take their house to the market, a family situation, or they don't want to upset another realtor. I run into that more than you think. And they just say, do you think you can find us something off market for this? It's like, well, let's give it a shot. I have a network to reach out to. And, there's a lot of other agents like myself within Windermere, within a big respectable brand like that we have that inventory. Mm-hmm. We have that first look. And so you might get opportunities that you didn't get elsewhere.
Versus like a smaller, and opportunities in my mind as I hear that is if I'm a buyer or a seller.
Yeah.
As a seller, I might sell it quicker and discreetly in this case.
Yeah.
Or as a buyer, I might be able to get a first look and get into a house before everybody else can come and make a bunch of offers that I might have lost out on.
Absolutely. As I was speaking more from a buyer's point of view, I would say that you might have access to some off-market properties. And off-market deals are really interesting, actually. I'm going to dive into that for a second because I kind of love these. They're really fun. One, it makes you look like a rock star when you can find an off-market deal for your client. And there's no better thing than throwing out onto my little Facebook group of Windermere agents and saying, hey, I'm looking for a 4-bed, 2-bath in Cottonwood Heights. This is the budget, blah, blah, blah. Somebody messaged me back, hey, I've got one coming up in 3 weeks. I can get you in today. It's like, ooh, this is perfect. And we put the deal together. Most of the time, this still happens at market value. The seller doesn't want to undersell the thing. Mm-hmm. The buyer just doesn't have to compete. They feel like they're getting a special deal because it didn't go out to the entire market. And in many ways they are. If it's a perfect house like that, there might be multiple offers on it that they got to avoid.
And the seller doesn't have to deal with open houses. They don't have to deal with get out of the houses.
So
people
much
come by.
easier for
when
a
we
seller.
sold our first house,
Mm-hmm.
I think we had like 60 walkthroughs over the course of like 2 weeks. And so my
How much
wife,
fun is that with kids?
Yeah,
and
she has to pack everything. She has to keep everything clean, which is hard enough with.
Yeah.
We had 2 kids and a newborn, so 3 total kids,
mm-hmm.
dogs, all that stuff, and so it was just this stressful. So yeah, if we didn't have to deal with that,
it would have been great, right?
That was awesome.
Yeah. I think the other big advantage to going with a big brand when you're a seller, depending on what you're trying to do, if you're trying to sell a high-end home, a lot of times that buyer is not in Utah. We've got everyone knows people are moving into Utah right now, right? It's not all California. It's a lot of California, but it's not all. And having access to be able to market to outside markets like that, it's huge. Mm-hmm. It can make or break where you're going to find a buyer, because it only takes one person to come in and pull that trigger at that right price point, and you can sell that house for $10, $15, $20, sometimes $50,000 more. And so getting somebody that just knows what they're doing, which at Windermere, we have a pretty high standard for if you're going to be with us. We expect you to know what you're doing. We require
as a real estate agent, not as like the buyer.
As a real estate agent, yeah. We expect a lot out of our agents. We hold a pretty high bar. We expect for a couple of different reasons. One, I want somebody that I don't know from another brokerage. When I call them and I say, hey, this is Brad with Windermere Real Estate, there's some power behind that. And we have to protect that. And so if our agents all of a sudden start having no idea what they're doing, getting a bad reputation, that reflects badly upon us. So we do a lot of training. We do a lot of investing in our agents' education and requiring all of them to have a transaction coordinator that goes through their file. We make sure everything's perfect that way. We're not missing deadlines. Just doing all the things to take the stress out of a transaction. These are all things that can be accomplished by a smaller brand, but it's a lot harder when they have a smaller staff. I can tell you, running the day-to-day operations of a large company, there's a lot going on. Trying to get one person to do all these different jobs, that'd be impossible. So at least in my opinion, to do them as well as we do.
Well, I want to dive a little bit further on this.
Sure.
Talked about, okay, you need to interview your agent. It's like, okay, so I'm going to go interview my agent, whatever brand they're with. Maybe they are new, maybe they're not. Maybe the brand is big, maybe it's not. But I can't imagine an agent, like if I'm like, hey, do you have a good network to get us sold quicker or off-market deals or whatever else, or outside of Utah or our geographic area? Maybe that's the pessimist in me, but I don't know that any agent's going to be like, you know what? No, I'm not the right guy for you. I think that it's a very competitive market to where they might be like, oh yeah, I've got a network of people for sure. So what follow-up questions maybe could I ask of like, okay, do they really have the backing behind this? Do they really have the network they're talking about?
Sure.
Versus, I mean, I've heard, we haven't experienced this, but I've heard of people like, yeah, I went with somebody, they promised all of this stuff. Our house has been on the market for 3 months. Nothing, right?
Yeah. There's a sense to anyone can make up a good answer, but that's where I'm really hoping people dive into the psychological side of their real estate agent. Get to know this person, figure out if they're telling you the truth. If they're not telling you the truth in one area, it's probably going to translate to a few others, right? As far as asking, okay, what reach do you have? I would ask them if they have a plan. Do you have a plan of weeks 1 through 8 or 1 through 12 of what to do to sell my house? What does your listing prep look like? What is included in your fee? These are all things that should be asked, especially on the seller side of things, because there's a lot that goes into selling a house, and most of it happens. I mean, the majority of the work should be done before the house hits the market.
Yeah.
And I could wing it as well as anybody up here, but I don't, because that's not the way to effectively sell a house. Having an entire plan put together, knowing what steps I'm going to take, and knowing that, hey, this is included at all my price points. I'm going to do the same thing for a townhome that I do for a multi-million-dollar home, because that's how I sell a house. It doesn't matter to me so much if what the commission is going to look like. It's I'm going to make sure that I put all of my listings into these certain publications. Your personal house might be sold by the time that your house is even published in this magazine. That doesn't matter, because I've got 10 more behind you that are currently active at the time that your house is active. So I've got people calling me and reaching out on those. And so I'm doing work beforehand to make sure that I'm not only just selling your house, but I'm selling my entire portfolio. I'm selling everything that is available on the market right now, which is, I would ask to see their portfolio, ask to see some of their stuff. Say, hey, do you have a flyer you could show me? Do you have a video you could show me? All these things. There's a lot of different ways right now to sell a house. And it's a really interesting time in the market to sell a house, because we're coming off of what is just one of the most crazy and wild roller coaster rides of a market that has existed, at least in our lifetime. I could make an argument forever. To see the spike that we had in 2020, 2021, to the interest rates that we have now, and it was kind of I won't say a hard crash, but it was a definite correction. For 18 months, if I had a pulse and I put a sign in the ground, I was going to get an offer on a house.
Yeah. And probably a bunch of bids.
And at that point it was, okay, how do I know which one to choose? Yeah. And that was the tough part of that market. And so there's, during that time, I remember, it would take me like 3 hours to organize the offers so that I could present them correctly, because there's so many, and they'd come in and I'd make an Excel spreadsheet that this is how my brain works. Is I'd say, okay, cool. This is the total bottom line. These are what they're asking for. And so you kind of have to evaluate, and then you narrow it down to say, hey, these are all the offers. You have to always present everything. These are the ones that, in my opinion, would be probably the best ones to focus on, and then go from there.
Yeah.
But the point of that is that during that time period, selling a house was not hard.
Yeah.
It was, representing a buyer was hard. Trying to get an offer accepted was hard, and those took things. But there's a lot of people that either got in the business during that time or let some of their habits go, to a level. I look at myself and I think, man, when's the last time I sent out a just listed postcard? I had that reflection. Somebody asked me if I send out just listed postcards, and I was like, well, yeah, of course I do. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't sent one of those out for a minute because it's sold by the time it even hits. What's the point? I caught myself in that.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, okay, I need to make sure that I'm getting ready and getting back to this. Those days of putting a sign in the ground and selling a house are gone. They are just not here. The average days on market is like 47 right now, as opposed to 4. You know, it's a way different. You can't just expect that it's going to go in the first week. And the agents that have not gotten back to doing everything that they need to do, in my opinion, are behind the 8 ball. They're for me, when I'm listing a house, I'm going to do professional photos. I'm going to do staging. I deep clean. I go through, and sometimes this is a little bit of an uncomfortable situation when you're going through a house and you're like, ooh, you got to take all those things down. Like, I'm so sorry that, I personally try and take everything out of a house where it's anything religious, anything political, anything that can sway somebody one way or the other. We're not trying to put that in the house. We want these people to be walking into their house, not yours.
Yeah.
And so, having those conversations, that's another point of make sure that you get along well with your agent. If somebody that you hate tells you to take down your picture, you're really not going to like it very much. It's going to be a pretty bad experience. But if somebody can tell you in a different way, like, hey, I think it's probably best if we take all your personalization out of this house so that we can have them walk into a blank slate, it goes a lot better.
Maybe you can, it sounds like, so now you really helped me here of okay, I'm looking for an agent. One, I need to know that they have experience, which is hard for those who are just getting into it because you have to overcome that barrier. But for me personally, I would prefer somebody that has experience, somebody that can tell me the truth and isn't trying to swindle me and I can trust, somebody that can communicate well with me. And then in my mind, it's kind of what we were talking about. The branding aspect of that probably is lower than the rest of those, but it comes into play in the sense of if I'm trying to get a feel for them, what do you have to offer? That kind of thing. And if you have the backing behind you of a good brand, they can answer that question with, here's a plan, I'm in marketing. So here's like the marketing resources that I have for that. Here's the network that I have for that. I don't know. Would you rank them differently?
I don't know. They go differently. I probably wouldn't say that the brand is lower. I think that it can be every bit as important depending on what you are trying to accomplish. Higher level, higher priced homes, brand becomes a little bit more important.
So I might have to deal with somebody I don't necessarily get along with as well, but they have experience in that niche.
Potentially.
To where they'd be willing to tell me.
I mean, I'll treat this like, okay, you're hiring an attorney. If you're hiring an attorney because you're trying to go sue somebody, do you want somebody who is incredibly friendly and that you love? Or do you want somebody who you know is going to represent your best interest and ask the hard questions? It doesn't need to go quite that far with a real estate agent because you have to make sure that the person is going to be personable to the buyer on the other side because you don't want people to leave because of the agent's recommendation. However, if you have an attorney that specializes in divorce and you are trying to set up an LLC, do you call a divorce attorney or do you call somebody who sets up LLCs for a living? You want somebody who has that specialty. You want somebody who has a little bit of experience what you're trying to do. The luxury market is interesting. It's the same transaction. It really is. It's the same paperwork. It's, there's just different aspects to it. There are more intricacies. There's usually, when you're looking at offers going back and forth, there can be some, when I was first getting into the luxury market, I remember we got an offer and it was like $400,000 low. And I'm sitting here thinking like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. That's more than my first house cost. And that's how much under list price they just did this. I presented it to my seller and they said, okay, that's not too bad. It just blew my mind, right?
Yeah.
Now I realize, okay, this is a different game. This is a different level that people are working with. And so there's some different intricacies as you get into the higher price points, but I would
so many psychological factors that go.
Oh, so many. Yeah. So many. You can get really deep with that too, where there's, you, as far as how you stage the house, what type of, if you're doing a horse property, are you going to stage it with mid-century modern furniture, or are you going to put it with, something that is a little bit more ranch? Or there's so many different ways that you can go about it to market and dive into that buyer of who do you think is the person that's going to buy that house. And it's really fun, quite honestly. There's so many different aspects that you can get into, and that's where my job gets really enjoyable.
Yeah,
where I can come up with 3 or 4 different strategies that I think all will be effective. We say, hey, you know what? You've got a 5-car garage. What if we took this and we did a photo shoot? We contacted like a local dealer or something like that. We had them bring in some high-end cars. We did a photo shoot and we sent it out and we did a little video type of thing. And we target people that want to have that little bit extra space, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Just doing something a little different, something that might get you exposure to that person that wasn't necessarily looking for a house until they saw the ad.
Yeah.
And that's the type of thing that makes a difference. All right, so I'm going to jump back into your experience a little bit more. You're looking for a house. You have your list of things that you want. How well did that match up with Caitlin's list of things that she wanted?
Yeah, I think like you say wants, and I think that there's kind of 2 parts to that, right? There's needs and wants. So like, What did I need? What did she need? And then we go into wants. And I think that experience, especially as you would like come out, we talk, well, we want a house. Great. Let's go look with Brad. And so we come out of that first, second house and you hit us with those questions of what did you like? What didn't you like? I think that got us to start having more serious conversations for the future houses of like, okay, before we just go randomly hitting houses that are listed, let's filter through those a little bit to narrow down those wants and the needs. So I think for me as a need, again, as I was mentioning a little bit earlier, is like I needed to know that the house was in good order because I couldn't fix stuff. I needed to know that it was going to be safe for my family. And so for me, that need is less, I think of like the neighborhood, right? And it's less of where is the school? What is the crime rate? Like, it's just like in general, what is the feeling of that neighborhood? I go over to her side and she needs it to be a home. She needs it to be functional to where this is going to sound worse than I think it is, but like if she's going to do the laundry or she's going to be in the kitchen, how does that all flow? Is it in an obscure place where she's having to reach high? Is it in places that just don't make sense? So I think functionality of the house was much more of a need for her, whereas mine was more of like structurally, does this work? How close is this to work? And where I need to go for my kind of roles, and then her roles are different. So finding a house that matched all of that is different than just throwing darts. But then we go into wants, and it's like, okay, well, I would like a bigger garage to have fun with. I grew up with a big backyard where we could play basketball and throw the baseball and hang out and dogs. So I wanted a yard that would make sense for all of that. The need to be close to work and then the want to be closer to work, I think it comes into there because I think those are a little bit different. Like,
sure.
I can deal with a 45-minute drive. That's still in the needs, but I would like to be closer than that. And then you get into the wants with her, and I think there's a cuteness factor. Caitlin is very physically fit and active. And so it was, what does that neighborhood look like? Not in terms of what I was looking at. It's how close are we to trails? How close are we to the kids' school if I want to walk them to school? How close are we to the gym? How close are we to the grocery store? Things like that, of her enjoyment of that. And luckily we were right by, at the time it was Daybreak. It was walking distance to Daybreak, which had all kinds of, it could just scratch that itch for her of, I want to run, I want to bike, I want to do whatever. So I think a lot of those wants and needs come, I wanted a big basement to entertain. I don't have a lot of friends that I like to hang out with, but of the few that I do like to hang out with, it's like, let's make it a fun spot. So
we're working on that list. So
parks, how close is it to park? Religiously, our churches that we would want to go to. So it was interesting to go through that dynamic because when we stepped into that, I don't know that we knew what we wanted and we needed. We were just excited that, hey, we're going to get our own house.
Yeah.
But to go through that was a fun exercise. And I think anybody can go through that in general, but I do sincerely think that you helped with that of with those questions that you would ask, with those things going on. And then also going like, okay, this doesn't have a want. How hard is it for us to get to that want of how much more do we have to spend, or how do we make that happen
Sure.
on top of the initial purchasing experience?
Yeah.
Or like a need, this doesn't meet a need. Could it, with some modifications or seller credits or whatever else, yes or no, and then we could make more realistic decisions. But that really helped us save a lot of time once we got through the first couple of, okay, that house is nowhere near what would work for us. Another want, we wanted the kids on the same level of us as us. We wanted their rooms close to us because they're younger, and so we have this like paranoia of if something goes wrong, we want to be close to be able to help.
Sure.
So that might have been
very
a need.
common. So
That might have been a need too, but
Yeah.
so that's kind of the wants and needs that we went through in our minds of what we were looking for in a house. And then
Sure.
after the first house, like that changes to the second house. Like, okay, we realized that this want is actually a need for us now, or
Yeah.
this need then isn't really a big deal for us now.
we're going to get real for a second here.
I love real.
It's not all sunshine and butterflies and rainbows trying to find a house, right? Talk me through a tough situation. What happened in this transaction, or even in the process of getting ready to buy a house, or, when you were under contract, anything that was tough for people that maybe we should give them a heads up. This is what buying a house is like.
Yeah. I think there's several things that I could talk about, especially the first time, because I had no idea what I was doing. But I think that the cost of homes will always be higher than we want as a buyer. So like, okay, I put together my wants. Even if you go like must-haves, would like to have, would really like to have, right? Like I would love to have a tennis court, a basketball court, a pool, indoors, all of that. But then like that budget gets to be, okay, that we're going to whittle down here.
I love that. I have a great story on this that is about one of our mutual good buddies, Wayne.
Yes.
So I helped Wayne and Lisa buy a couple of houses for them, and they've been wonderful. And we were looking at houses, and they were coming back from Texas. We were looking at a certain price range in a certain neighborhood, and I can't remember who. One of either Alyssa or Wayne sent over a house that was a good bit more than the ones that we'd been looking at. And I just called him and I said, "Okay, are you prepared to pay this much for this house? Because I guarantee you, when you go in there, you're gonna want to live there. And everything else is going to be compared to that." And go figure. We went through the house and they bought it.
Oh, nice.
And it was one of those where it's like, okay, guys, are you sure this is more than you said you wanted to spend? But having that realistic view of, I really don't recommend looking at something that you don't want to buy right now, or you can't afford right now, because you'll compare everything to it and it just dashes your dreams. It was really tough for me because I see a lot of houses I can't afford.
Yeah.
And so when I'm looking for myself, it's like, oh man, I'd love to spend $3 million on a house. I got to sell a few more of these things.
And I think we recently had that interaction probably about a year ago now, where we were looking at a house that was expensive, but it had pickleball court, it had a pool, it had an awesome house.
And I still think about it, and it was so close to me.
It was so close to you and Jake. And I still have dreams of that house that
me too.
Are pleasant and unpleasant. But that was a different situation where there would potentially be multiple families living there and all that stuff. But so going into that experience, I think my eyes were a little bit different of like, this is above my budget. But I think the point is, how can I afford this house is the question that comes up in my mind. And especially on that first one, because I had grown up, my parents bought their house for $78,000 50 years ago or whatever it was. And then you go up and we had a little bit of a boom when we first got in. It's not nearly what 2020 and 2021 were.
Yeah.
But it was a very hot market at the time when we were looking. And so we bought our first house for $370,000, which at the time is like, oh, I wish I could find that now. But then that was a ton. That was huge. And I was like, I remember when my brother first bought his house, and my brother is really successful financially. He got a $300,000 house, and we're like, he's a billionaire. Like anyone who can have a $300,000 house is loaded. And then my first house is $370,000. So just there's that psychological like, how am I going to do that?
I mean, I felt the same way. I've compared myself to you my entire life. You spent $100,000 more on a house than I did. I'm like, oh man, this guy's rich.
No, comparison is the thief of joy. But
Oh yeah.
they're really psychologically going into, you think about like, what were the tough conversations? We looked at, it seemed like the houses that we were looking at that met our wants and needs, the wants that we had to live with, which I guess you could justify as needs. We're sitting around that range. And that was a little bit above where I felt comfortable at the time. And so that question with Caitlin was, how am I going to afford this? Because I was the primary breadwinner. So Caitlin, how am I going to do this? And then how are we going to make that work?
Yeah. And
Because
what pressure does that put on you?
Exactly. And psychologically, everything. And I think it is a team sport for sure, because now we have to talk about, all right, like how often are we going to eat out? What groceries are we going to get? Can we not drive? Like, are we able to, do we need 2 cars, or what kind of cars do we need? So I had like this Hyundai Accent that got like 40 miles to the gallon.
I remember that.
So it was
great
like,
one.
That was something where it's like, okay, I have to make some sacrifices in some areas just to make it work. And we were very fortunate to have family help out. So when you think of like the financing of this, a big chunk of that down payment were gifts from family, which not everybody has. And so I think like that honesty and those tough conversations, we were able to get through a little bit that with you, luckily, because the financing would have worked out with that. So that was one that was kind of a tougher conversation during that process. I think another one for me, being a first-time home buyer, related to that and the finances of that, was there was a house I remember in Heber that I really, really liked. And again, say our budget was $350 at the time. This one's like $750,000. So I'm like, Brad, what if we just offered them $400,000 less? So you're like, on luxury homes, $400,000 off of a $7 million home, percentage-wise, isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
But $400,000.
60% under list price? Sure, let's do it.
And there are a couple of those that I remember bringing up to you. Because again, like you read these stories, and I think it's more prevalent now on social media, but you hear of like, take Grant Cardone or Robert Kiyosaki of like, yeah, I went in and it was $400,000. I offered him 2. They said yes because everything. So that's
not real.
But that's what I was reading at the time.
Sure.
So I'm like, yeah, let's just do this. And so you're like, Eric,
everybody's an online real estate agent. It's that's just the way it goes.
So you're like, Eric, I love you. I will do whatever you want, but number one, they're not going to accept that. They won't accept us working with them, period. Their agent probably won't take us seriously if they are representing any other house. I'm willing to do it for you, but I'm going to have egg on my face. Like, I will lose respect from people. Are you sure you want to do this?
Did I say that out loud?
So it was just like, yeah, okay. Like,
see, that honesty thing really played there because that's exactly what happens. And you know, it's a disservice. If somebody else had me do that for them, and then that happened to be the agent that was representing you on a house where I had a real offer, they're going to remember and be like, who is this guy? Like, no. And so I was very honest at that point. I was like, please don't make me. You know? But
another really tough conversation from that. So that was a big house in Heber that was nice.
I remember.
There was a super cute house at the south end of Heber. If you remember, it's I think Daniel is the official name of the super cute rambler, right, a little bit kind of a greenish, light green tint to it. Like there's a name for the type of house, but I can't remember what it was. So we go through that and I loved it. And it was listed for $320, which was in our budget. It didn't have a finished basement, so there was going to be some stuff there, but the top floor had everything we needed, had a yard. I've always loved Heber. And then our entire family talked us out of it. So Caitlin's parents, and I'm calling them out, I don't know if they'll listen to this. They're like, oh, you're going to be so far away from us. You're going to hate the winters. It's so bad up in Heber. You're going to have that commute. At the time I was working from home, but it was like, you're going to have a commute to get to anything. You could be snowed in. You don't know anybody up here. My parents said the same thing. You're going to be so far away, blah, 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 blah. It's like, all right. So we didn't end up getting that. We spent more for a house in South Jordan, which was great. But literally 6 months later, Caitlin's parents list their home and they build a home up in Heber.
I know.
And,
it's so
and they've been trying to get us to go back up there ever since.
Yeah.
But even 6 months from when, so it was listed at $320. That's what we would have bought it for. 6 months later, just 6 months later, it's at like $480. And then a year later, it had been listed because they finished the basement and everything. It was like $750,000. So I'm just like, what the hell happened there? How did this work? And my brother has subsequently moved up there. So it's like, everybody talks us out of this. And then it would have been a great investment opportunity. Number one, it was super cute. And everybody, I don't know, just don't make your housing decisions off of
family,
other people's decisions.
You're not allowed to be handsome and lucky at the same time. That's really what it came down to.
It is?
I got everyone together and I was like, guys, you really need to talk them out of this. It's not fair to everyone.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, Ray and Linda, I'll find you a home up in Hebrew. Because you sold their home.
I sold their. They had a beautiful house,
Draper house
in Draper. Yeah, man, that was $800 at the time, and
that'd be crazy expensive.
I would pay $800 for that yesterday.
Yes,
my goodness. No, that was a fun house because that was when there was a hot minute there where Britt came into the business with me, and we're filming videos together and doing everything. There's just the most adorable picture of her and I, and our heads are poking out the front door of that house. And I've used that photo and things, and that was Ray and Linda's house. So that's fun.
So the tough conversations happen not just with the agent buyer or seller, but with like the spouse, kids, the extended family, especially if that family is helping with the payments, like they're going to want to have an influence on where you are. So,
talk to me about the negotiation process a little bit. What do you remember? What were, a lot of the stressful times can be, this isn't something where you submit an offer and 10 minutes later, you know what's happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hurry up and wait situations. So talk to me about what that was like, especially as a first-time home buyer.
Well, I think the world in general is going to so much more of a transparency economy where if you're hiding things, people will find it. You think of all these big companies, right, that are, they were spending all of this money on private jets, but they're supposed to be helping people. It just comes out, right, and just standard practice. So I think the big thing with real estate for me that was hard is the transparency is tough. And it's not that you weren't transparent. It's just that you're having conversations with an agent, a third party, their third party. The buyer and the seller aren't a part of that. And I know that there are reasons for that. So we would go like, hey, it's listed at 370. Is there any wiggle room? Let me go ask. But that seller is supposed to be like, well, I'm trying to get the most out of this too.
Sure.
So maybe there is, maybe there isn't. What are you thinking? And it's kind of the first one to throw out a number loses. And so there's a lot of that in the negotiation process that was just hard because I didn't know what to expect. So I'm like, offer 50% of what they're asking. But then as we narrowed it down here, it wasn't that. I think our house that we bought had one or two other offers at the time when we first made it. And so it was like, do we offer asking but ask for some concessions? Do we offer below asking but not ask for concessions? And so kind of going through that process was important. I wouldn't say that it was fun. I'm not a negotiator in general, which you've experienced in real time as I try to get money from people or try not to get money from people. But so that negotiation process, one, coming to the realization of, okay, what is a realistic offer that we can make now that we understand it's at the high end of our budget? Is there any wiggle room? It seems like there's going to be a give and take on both of that. So if I'm asking them for less here, that means that they're less willing to accommodate here. And what I think you helped me with was, okay, it's probably better to get the list price where we want and take into consideration the concessions because that's going to help with closing costs that you may or may not have built into your payments. That's going to help with other things. So don't necessarily focus on getting like, okay, we want this from 370 down to 360 when they're willing to make $15,000 in concessions. So there are benefits to that. So I think that knowing those intricacies, and there are different ways to organize those deals to make it make sense for everybody. But that's what I remember from the negotiation process. I have a question for you on this, by the way.
Sure.
It seems like so many times I hear these sellers agents say, you know what, they really want this to go to a good family. They really want this to go to a certain person. And if there are three offers on the table and one is asking, one's way below asking, do they really care that it's a family that they want? Or is it like, okay, we need this financially? So
my answer is going to be it depends, which is just such a cop-out answer, but I'm going to use it.
I would think if all the offers are the same, then it's like, okay,
of course. So this is where having a good agent actually makes a difference, is because if I have the offer that's $15,000 below, $20,000 below, but I have communicated very, very well with the agent the entire time, I'm calling and checking in with them saying, hey, where are we at? These guys really love this home. Let me know what it's going to take to get this done. And somebody comes in with an offer that is $20,000 higher, but the seller actually does care about who goes to this family. A lot of it is going to depend on where the seller is at in their life. If it's somebody who they don't really need the money, like let's just be honest, $20,000 to them, it's not going to make a difference on what their life is. Or it's somebody that's, I am squeezing every penny that I can out of this thing to put in my next down payment. That's going to make a difference for sure. In those cases where they're squeezing every penny, probably not going to make that much of a difference, just being honest with you.
Yeah.
In the case of the person that actually cares, having a good agent that communicates and getting to the point where you can get that seller's agent to call you back and say, hey, you're $20,000 low. How much higher can you go? Can you make this work? You might be able to go higher.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the buyer might be able to go up a little bit. They just didn't want to play all their cards.
Yeah.
I now have given you that opportunity to say, this is what's going to take to get the deal done.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, 9 times out of 10, they'll be like, yep, let's do it.
I think we had that on the one that I was referencing by you, the house
Yeah.
that we looked at last year. It seemed like they genuinely wanted to work with us. They had another offer.
Yeah.
I don't know where the offer was. I think that we were coming in like ideally we wouldn't be right at asking. It would be a little bit less. And we pulled out just for the dynamics that were going on. It wasn't for that. But that one I genuinely felt, because we actually met the sellers. When we were there, they came by and we talked to them, and they were super cute family, very similar to ours.
Yeah.
So it felt like that was something
Well,
where it mattered.
I've talked with that agent several times since. Yeah. I mean, she's awesome. We've got a good relationship. We actually had a thing that came up where it was like, we had a mutual client, which is not always the thing that you want in real estate. But she called me and kind of brought me up to speed. She said, hey, I think this is what's going on. It's because we had a good relationship. We worked out and it was just fine.
Yeah.
But there definitely is that element.
Well, I wonder, I don't think this is realistic, but like, could the sellers interview the buyers, right? I know that's not realistic. There's a lot of problems with that. But in that case, it seemed like it happened. And after it happened, it seemed like they were like, let's make this work.
Yeah.
Like, how does this?
It is very rare for the sellers to meet a buyer.
Yeah.
You are one of the very few people who are be like, Eric, just go charm their pants off and we're going to get a great deal on this thing. Yes. I usually avoid that at all costs. I'll just be honest with you. Even with, people that I know, like love and trust, right? It's just not a good idea because everything is fine until one thing goes wrong,
right?
And then emotions get involved.
Yeah.
That's why you have an agent. That's what we're here for, is to filter all those emotions out and make sure that we can get back to the most reasonable and rational place to get this deal to the finish line.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the seller wants to sell the house. Buyer wants to buy the house. I have to fit these two pieces together. Sometimes it's Velcro and it's perfect and it's great. Sometimes I am putting a square peg in a round hole. Sometimes I am trying to put something in a hole that doesn't even exist because we've got such hard-headed people that just make life harder than it needs to be.
Yeah.
But that's the role. That's the job.
Yeah.
And honestly, there is definitely a dynamic between agents where if I know one agent on the other side, I've worked with them before, had a great experience. I know that when things get a little bit tough, they're willing to work with me. And we can say, hey, let's tackle this problem together. Our appraisal came in low. Let's tackle this together. Not our appraisal came in low. We want a $50,000 drop or we're walking. That's not a fun text or a message to get. Or
that was a question I have for, like, what do those conversations look like? You can
there's
go
a
from
whole
either one,
range.
but it's like, if I'm the buyer, you're representing me, we're going to a seller. Hey, it's listed at X. We're close. We really like the house. What wiggle room we have? Like, what does that conversation look like back and forth? Is it text? Is it a phone call? Is it both, depending on what's going on?
For me, that should be a phone call.
Yeah.
That's if you're texting, if it's somebody that I already know really, really well, and I can shoot them a text a couple of times, but that's because I already have a previous relationship. An effective communication, an effective job as an agent isn't done through sending emails and texts. You don't just send an offer and wait. That doesn't, if nobody else is involved, it might work, but it doesn't really invite the opportunity to create any sort of a relationship. A job as agents is to bring people together. I have a fiduciary to my client to get them the best deal possible, but it's also to represent their best interests. Sometimes their best interest is not me being a bulldog. It's not me going and getting every penny they can because now I've upset the seller, and when it comes time to ask something from them, they say no. It's to negotiate a good deal, as good of a deal as I can possibly get for my clients, but also to make this an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
It's something that there's so much stress that's around buying a house. And I don't think I fully understood that until I was an agent for 2 years before, because you have to have 2 years. I didn't know this before getting into real estate. You have to have 2 years of tax returns as a self-employed individual before you can buy your house. So I did this for 2 years thinking, man, these people are making a big deal out of things, until I finally started buying one. I was like, oh, that blade of grass is so much longer than the other one. It really affected me.
Yeah.
And, just the silly things we go through, picking apart a house, making all these plans. Like, I've got a whole list of things that I was going to do to my current house. I bought this 5 years ago. I bet I have done 2%.
I think I've broken more things in this house than I have fixed things in this house.
And that's kind of the way that it goes.
Yeah.
But back to having, what is that process like? What is that phone call like? I always just try and make a friend. Mm-hmm. I am definitely the type where you're going to get more bees with honey than vinegar. Is that the saying? I don't know.
Feels right.
Sure. Let's go with that.
Really good.
But I always have a much better reaction from people trying to approach this with kindness and saying, hey, look, I know this is not going to be exactly what you want to hear. This is where we're at. How can we work through this together? And don't get me wrong. If somebody asks something that's absolutely unreasonable, yeah, I'm going to call them on that. Mm-hmm. I have no problem doing that. That's the sports side of me that hates to lose. But the process of, I think probably an appraisal is one of the most difficult processes that can come in. If, let's say, we're under contract at $600,000 and an appraisal comes in, everything's been fine. It's been a great transaction. The appraisal comes in at $580,000. There's a $20,000 gap. Mm-hmm. How do we make this up? Because what that means for the buyer is that if the seller doesn't want to drop the price, which they're not required to, the buyer's got to come up with an extra $20,000 in cash to put down on this thing, or else they're not going to get the loan on the house. Or I have to go to Mr. Seller and say, hey, we have to drop this $20,000. And at that point in the transaction, it's really interesting because you've gone through so much to get this house. You've gone through, as a seller, they have cleaned their house. They've prepped it. They've shown it. They've gone through the offer process. They've gone through the inspection. Now we're almost to the finish line and you're just going to punch me right in the face with this. Yeah. Like, it's not a fun place to be. Same thing with the buyer. There's so many emotions. There's so much excitement. They think that they have this new house. It's like you're dangling a carrot in front of them, and all of a sudden somebody comes and snatches it away. Mm-hmm. And that can be one of the toughest conversations in real estate. And I've had it go good. I've had it go bad. I've had, everything in between, because so much of it, I wish I could control what everyone else does. I can't. Mm-hmm. I can't control what I do half the time. And so to be able to make that a successful transaction and make it something where we can actually get this done, get this deal to the closing table with all parties being happy, is an absolute art form. I'm going to call out Molly Jones on this. Molly is an agent that she might have beat me out my first year as Rookie of the Year. So way to go, Molly. But it seems like every deal that we do together, we have an appraisal issue, which is so interesting. I think we've done like 3 or 4 of them. Mm-hmm. And every time we're just like, again, like, what is happening here? This is so crazy. But we've worked through every single one of them because I have a great relationship with her. She knows that I'm not going to do anything to her clients to intentionally screw this up. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do everything that I can with my clients to get them to be reasonable. Yeah. Getting people to the point of being reasonable is sometimes a lot of work. Yeah. But
you touched on a couple of things there that takes me back to my PTSD of buying a house.
Yeah.
It's not just the negotiation of the first deal. Like, once that's accepted,
that's the start.
30-day window or whatever it is of due diligence, appraisals, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. That was a stressful mess, and not a mess. Sorry, but that was stressful for
stressful.
me.
That's okay.
But what I appreciated is you took all of that. Like, I didn't have to worry about dealing with the appraiser. I didn't have to worry about dealing with the inspector. I didn't have to do, like, that was out of mind for me, which made it really nice for me. The other thing you did that I remember very vividly is you're like, okay, there's going to be an inspector. Their job is to find everything wrong and make you feel like the house is going to explode tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That's their job. And it's good that they do it because we need to know what's there and what could be a potential problem.
Yeah.
But if the inspection comes back and everything isn't perfect, that's okay. Like, I'll go through that and I'll prioritize things. If there's a gas leak, that's a problem. If it's an outlet has a chip on it, like that's an easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just remember that process from offers accepted to moving into the house. There was a lot that happened that was stressful. And as much of that as you can take off of a first-time home buyer was really appreciated.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's part of the job is I want to filter all of these stressful things, and I only want to relay to you what you need to know.
yeah.
I'm going to solve as many problems as I possibly can before they get to you. If it's something that you don't need to know about or you don't need to stress about, I'm just going to fix it and I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
If there's something that is going to impact you financially or have an impact on your homeownership journey or anything like that, yes, obviously I'm going to tell you about that. But my job is to take those minor aspects that you don't need to stress about because you're already running around the house with your hair on fire. Mm-hmm. I don't need to add to that.
Yeah.
My job is to make it easier for you. And so, the inspector thing, the phrase that I use is, hey, they're going to come back with a booklet. It's going to be this thick of all the things that are wrong with the house. That is expected. Yeah. You could be a new build. They're still going to find things that are wrong with it. We need to find the things that are going to impact you that are, a financial burden or a large safety issue. That's what we're going to do. And sometimes even those aren't going to be included. I just want you to know about them.
Yeah.
It's if there's 10 other people knocking on the door ready to buy this house, chances are you're probably not getting a whole lot of those things fixed. But at least you know.
Yeah. No, I think that was a really big benefit of that experience of being able to go through. And I think where people really start to have conflict and anger is when expectations and results aren't close.
Sure.
So setting the right expectations of all of this, the expectations of financially, what we've talked about, setting the expectations of going and looking at homes, setting the expectations of the negotiation process,
mm-hmm.
and then setting the expectations of from agreement to moving in, and then setting the expectations of, okay, now you're going to build a home. Like you're taking this building and now you're going to turn it into a home. Like here's what you need to expect moving forward, mm-hmm. which is where home warranties come in and other stuff.
Sure.
That's all done. But in the next year, if something happens, here's what you can expect.
Yeah.
I think if those align to the communications points you've made, then there's a pleasant experience for people. It's if those don't, if we're setting unrealistic expectations either way, that's where conflict, I think, really starts to hurt.
Yeah, which you have to outline the way that things are going to go for sure. I try and take people on the entire journey of, hey, this is from starting to look at a home to actually closing on the home. And I don't expect you to remember any of that. I just walk you through it so that hopefully when this comes up later, you can reference back to that conversation and be like, okay, I very briefly remember that. Can you tell me more about it? Mm-hmm. That's the type of thing. And so getting those expectations set from the get-go to know how long it's going to take, to know exactly what condition is the house going to be when you're there. Mm-hmm. Is that TV going to be there? Is it just going to be a TV mount? Those are the type of things where you'd be shocked at. That can really anger some people. And, it's a $4,000 TV and it's a $40 mount.
Yeah, we thought that would be included.
Yeah, exactly. So I will say we went through this whole long journey. We we found you the perfect house in Hebrew. You got talked out of it. We found you
Mowers,
all these different places. We landed in a pretty wonderful home for you. Mm-hmm. 10 years later, how's that impacted your life?
Yeah, I have some awesome things to say, and then in the spirit of transparency, I'll have some other things to say. Sure. The house, like from a pride perspective, definitely checked the box. It was a really cool looking house, not like a weird way, but in like this is a nice house. The neighborhood was awesome. I still have really, really close friends that lived in that neighborhood that we met.
Oh, cool.
It's awesome. I loved the neighborhood. I loved everything about it. School was great. Really good house. We were really pushing our budget to move into that, which we made it, which was fantastic. And that first time home buying experience was amazing. Here's where I think it's a positive. I just hope people can understand it that way, is we were presented with the house that we're in right now as it wasn't on the market yet.
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple who, this is a 2-story house that we're in. One of them had just come off of a hip surgery. The other one was a knee surgery. They didn't want to be going up and down the stairs. They were going to move within the neighborhood. They were concerned about making sure that the family who moved in was what they hoped for, because they were going to be living in the church world. We go to the same church. They were going to have to interact with this couple or family moving in. And then if anything was wrong with the house, they were in the same neighborhood. And so
you knew where to find them.
Yeah. And my sister is 3 doors down from me, and she knew about it. She's the one who told us. And so we came into this one and we're talking with the couple. Beautiful house. We love it. And what are you thinking of listing this at? He tells us. And so I was like, look, we can't do that. The only way that this works is, and we listed off like 20 things.
Yeah.
We hadn't been in our first house for a full 2 years yet. And so there are financial implications that come with that. With that house, so I was like, all right, so to meet, he was going to list it at a certain amount. He's like, if we do this beforehand, don't involve agents, then it can come down to here. And so it was like, okay, at that level, I need to sell my house and I need to get a net of this much to make this one work. And so I mentioned, like, we list that house, and I remember coming to you and I was like, Brad, I don't know how to tell you this. I need to sell my house without an agent.
I remember you called me for that, but
I did.
The way that you approached that was very Eric of you. You said, I need help.
Yeah.
This is where I'm at. And me as a friend, like, yes, of course. And, I very much, to this day, you have to make it a rule in real estate. There's people that are not going to use you. There's people that are going to use you and then they can't use you. You had the courage to call me before it happened and say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is the situation that I'm in. Man, if somebody doesn't help you with that, that's just not a good person.
Well, and I still feel that guilt of like, you're worth whatever that percentage is that you're going to get out of that. And so that's like, I was like, Brad, is there an amount that you can help me, point me in the right direction, but that's not a waste of your time and that's not taking advantage of you? Like, when you say use, like, there's use your help, but then also like negatively using someone. I never want to feel like I'm negatively using somebody.
Sure.
And so I was like, here's what has to happen. So with that house, another close friend was like, hey, I'm willing to at least post it. I'm not going to get a commission out of it. Like, just do it. But you're going to run the open house. You're going to do all of that. Mm-hmm. And so all of that went into that next thing. But because of where we were set up on that first deal of that house, we had the room, because the market had gone up, we had the room to take a really nice entry level first home and then upgrade to where we are now, which set us up. You look like 10 years down the road, we would not be in this house if we didn't do what we did on the first house. Yeah. Plus everybody else in my life that's helped with that, with the family, like the family on the first house. But
sure.
Like, my kids wouldn't enjoy the school and the neighbors and the close family that I'm with without that first experience with the first house. I wouldn't experience what I have, a podcast room, that wasn't available in the first. So
your backyard that's bigger than some parks.
Backyard that is a park in and of itself. So I think as you go into that transaction, I think that the party that we bought the first house with felt like it was a win-win, but we also got the deal that we needed to make the payment where I needed it to be. And then when we sell that house at a place where it worked. And it's so funny because we listed that other house, the first house. The guy selling this one was like, hey, we are going to list this on this date. And it was like 2 weeks after our 2-year mark in the other house. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I can't remember the exact dates, but let's say we're going to list this house on May 14th. Our 2-year mark would have been May 1st.
Yeah.
So we basically had 2 weeks to sell this house. In 2 weeks, 60 showings, if you will, of people coming in, chaos, hectic. And it was on the last day of that timeline. He was like, if you don't have a deal signed, then we're just going to list it. They had pictures of the house. They were ready to go.
Oh, man.
That last day, a couple who had come to our self-done open house, they make a cash offer. And it was like exactly where we needed it to be, because we listed a little bit high, assuming that there would be some sort of a negotiation. I mean, it was like to the dollar, like what their offer was net got us exactly what we needed for this.
Oh, I love
close. And because it was cash, it could close faster.
Sure.
And it was just like boom, 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 boom. It all worked out. I mean, like
Now you're in this beautiful home.
2 years after that, they listed theirs for twice what they bought it for. But
We won't talk about that.
no, but ours has gone up too. So
Yeah,
we got
exactly.
this at a great deal because of everything that worked out. But I still give you credit for that, because that wouldn't have happened if the first experience wouldn't have happened in a variety of different ways, plus the help that you gave of selling the first one, even though you weren't the listing agent on the first one.
Sure. I mean, there's part of that where I'm not a client just during you're not a client just during a transaction.
Yeah.
You are a client for my entire life. If you're taking on a renovation and you need to find a painter, you should be able to call your real estate agent for that, because we do it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I work with roofers nonstop. I work, with somebody that needs to replace a yard sprinkler. Those are all things that, as a full service real estate agent, you should be able to provide. And that also means, hey, my client that I care about, and granted, yes, we're very, very good friends, but even outside of that, if I would have just met you outside of that and it was somebody that I met at an open house and they came to me and they said, hey, this is going to be so good for my family. I don't know what to do in this. Will you help me? I'm going to say yes. It's not like I want to work for free all the time. But that's not what it's about. It's about helping your clients get to where they want to be.
Yeah.
And, long term, you've sent me several clients after that. So it's not like you haven't taken care of me,
Yeah.
and that's the way that everything works out. I feel like you have to do what's right by people. And if you do, it's going to come back to you.
Yeah.
And
I think knowing where that line is too, though, I think you can kind of get a sense of somebody who's taking advantage of you in certain ways. But
sure.
no, I think that, and to your full service part, like you brought that up to me. I think it was in the fall where you expressed that idea, right? If somebody needs something done to their house, period, come to me and I will have somebody. And I think that that's really helpful, because I'm going to talk to you about that, because we want to remodel our master bathroom and stuff. And so it's like, okay, well, who do I go for that? Because I can go online, and again, whoever's paying to have their ad there, that just means that they have a marketing budget to pay for it. It doesn't mean that necessarily they are reputable or they're good or whatever else. So to know, to go to somebody who's done it so many times and know, okay, for flooring, this guy I know will do a good job. For a roof, I know this guy will do a good job. Financing, I know this guy will help with that, or whatever else works with that. So, I mean, we brought you in to look at my mom's house, right? Because that's going to be up on the market here soon. So just all of that, I think, is a big deal, because you looked at the house and like, okay, if you put in this amount of money, you could potentially get this much more. Don't waste it on here, put it here. I know a guy who can do this. I know somebody who can clear out the junk. I know all of that stuff comes into the...
Yeah, it's what's the best return? Which, unless you're doing this every day and you see what actually makes a difference in selling a house, how are you supposed to know that?
Yeah.
It's not a fair thing to put on a consumer.
Well, and justifying, we talked about this too, if these services that come out of whatever the percentage is lower or whatever else, what is the true value of an agent? And so whether your percentage is 3 or I think it's 3 on each side or whatever the standard is, but if you're going to be like, yeah, I'm going to help you with all of this, then that makes sense. But if it's like, oh, I want X%, I'm going to put it on Utah Real Estate and then I'm out, like that's different. Like that,
it is. And you do have those different range of brokerages and agents out there.
And in this market, to your point, before 2 years ago, you could have gotten away with it. Yeah, you just throw it on there and you're going to get 10 offers in the next 24 hours. Yeah. But now I don't think that it's quite that hot. So I think having somebody who will do more than that is important. And
you're seeing I see it in the data right now. I can see what brokerages have what market share and everything like that. And back when it was very, very easy to sell a house, you were seeing a very large market share by, I'm not going to say any names, should we say Friendy, that came on and was really hot and had all the billboards and everything. And that's because it was very easy to sell a house. Well, they're not around as much anymore. And I think that there's going to be a very large need for somebody that can do the full service to sell a house. There's a reason that I charge 6% to sell a house, and it's always it's going to be with all these lawsuits and everything that are national going on. I don't know how familiar you are with all of those, but things are changing in the industry. But there's a reason I charge what I charge. I cover a lot of things, and I would expect that I don't just put your house on the market and then say, okay, great, bring me offers. This is all I'm going to do. No, I'm running marketing campaigns. I'm spending money to get your house out there. I'm spending a percentage of what you're paying me on your own house so that it gets sold for the top dollar. That's the way it should go.
We've gone some time, but I talked about transparency.
Yeah.
And that's the question that I want to send back to you. Those lawsuits that you mentioned, I don't know all the details, but a big part of them is a lack of transparency, or something was pitched as something, then behind the scenes, gotcha, right? Yeah. So I think the world in general is going to more transparency. How do you see the real estate market evolving over the next 10 years with all of the technology that's available, all of the, I think AI is a buzzword, trendy thing, but the ability to create things quickly that you wouldn't otherwise and do things in a different way. Where do you see that market going, specifically from a transparency side?
I think there's going to be a very large difference. And right now you've got, I'm going to say, you've got a full service agent, a mid service agent, and then I'm going to put your house on the MLS type of agent. I think we're going to see a much larger spread between the market share that the full service agents have and I'm going to put your house on the market. I think that mid-level of service, I don't think there's a spot for it, quite honestly. I think that there's going to be, I want somebody who knows exactly what they're doing and can walk me through this entire process. And then there's the person that thinks I can do this on my own. I need your access to the MLS, which is really interesting. A few years ago, everyone wanted to sell their house on their own. It's what, I'd say 5 to, the last 5 years, that's kind of become a trend. Now it's cool to have an agent, which I love. No, but I think there's more of a trend to paying somebody for what they know. They're realizing, and I think it's an aspect of raising values when they see, okay, this is a big purchase. This is going to be the probably single biggest thing that I ever buy. I should probably get somebody who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's going to be the trend of where things go. These lawsuits have been very interesting, and, we're located in Utah. Utah's done a very good job of being transparent as far as listing what the buyer's agent commission is, which is that's kind of the core of this entire lawsuit is buyer agent commissions. And I think that there's going to be a trend that goes much, much more towards getting an agent that is full service and is an absolute expert at what they do. I think you're going to see there's probably, there's 4 or 5 bigger brokerages that have a pretty good lion's share right now. I think that their lion's share is going to get even larger of the market share.
Is that because they're recruiting more people wanting to sell?
No, I think that they're the same amount of agents are going to do more business.
Okay.
It's already, you've got the 80-20 rule. It's probably the 90-10 rule in real estate. You've got 10,000 agents, and those are 10,000 agents in Utah. 40% of them did 1 or less transactions last year. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
And 1 or less transactions, you're not paying the mortgage with that.
Right.
And so I think that the agents that do more to stand out, the agents that are willing to go that extra mile, the agent that is willing to, rather than watch an argument over a garage door opener, go to Home Depot, spend $25 and put one on the doorstep, those are the people that are going to continue to get business.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't cover? Any other deep, dark secrets that you need to know?
Oh, man, we don't have enough time for that.
A lot of skeletons.
Yeah. I would probably just end this with saying I'm going to actually ask you to describe your dream house in 2 sentences.
So the first thing that I would need in my dream house is for it to be practical. And the second thing that is important to me is I want it to be a place where I can have fun with the people that I care about.
I love that. I think you might be the only person on this podcast ever when I ask about their dream house that says practical.
Yeah. Because like
it's so Eric.
We'll go
it.
on Utah Road. We'll look at these like mega mansions and it's like, man, I would never want to maintain that. Like even our house here, it's not huge, but it's plenty of room for us. We have rooms that I can turn into a podcast room, or that we have as a man games room that's got a bunch of stuff in it.
Yeah.
And so, like a house that's large enough that gives us the space we need, but it's practical enough to where cleaning it isn't a problem, heating and air conditioning it isn't ridiculous. But so for me, it's like, it's not necessarily a massive house, but it might be a massive yard that has, it's got.
How many rakes have you gone through?
Yeah. It's not even like landscaped. It's more of just like functional with a basketball court that is also a tennis court that has pickleball lines on it. Right. Yeah. Or to have a golf simulator in a shed or whatever.
You would never get rid of me.
Right? That's what I mean. You just want to hang out.
I'd be here forever.
Like a artificial turf putting green with some tee boxes somewhere, right? Like, so it's like at my house, it is the house where I'm comfortable bringing friends if we do want to watch a game. Caitlin likes exercise. She's teaching a class right now. So something that she can come and bring her friends for exercise or fitness or whatever else. Again, I'm not like a big party person where it's like, let's throw this huge party, but I have a very tight-knit group of people that I really like.
The 7 people that are like really close to your life, we all fit, and it's great. Yeah. And we get to have a good time. Good. Well, thanks for coming on, Eric. Really appreciate it. Yeah. And we'll get going on to the next one. Welcome to the Property Pulse Podcast, your dynamic gateway to the rhythmic world of real estate. I'm Brad Hansen, your dedicated host and compass for a simplified real estate journey to elevate your experience. From uncovering hidden gems to savvy strategies and exclusive interviews with top realtors, we are your source for innovative insights that save you precious time, stress, and money. Whether you're a motivated buyer or a seller with dreams, it's never just about real estate. It's about how you feel throughout your experience. Join our community by hitting that subscribe button, and let's sync up to the pulse, heart, and soul of real estate. Your connection starts right here.